guys, the Curious Owl here, and today I'm going to be reviewing the book More Happy Than Not by Adam Silvera. This is my very first Adam Silvera book, and I have to say I was thoroughly impressed with his work. I've heard so many great things about it, so I went into this with some really high expectations for Adam's writing style and his way to develop characters, and I was not disappointed in the slightest. Adam actually exceeded a lot of my expectations in terms of telling this story, and this book went into some really dark things that I did not expect it to go into, but I also did at the same time because I know that like all of his books incorporate some form of sadness, and I know that most people reading these books have had multiple times where they've sobbed through large chunks of this book, and I have to say Adam really got me to that point. There were a lot of times where I just felt my heart breaking in this book because of some of the content that was involved with it. Even if I couldn't exactly relate to it in every single way, there were a lot of things I was able to relate to in terms of this character, and that was this main character, and the things that he kind of went through in this story. So for those of you who don't know anything about this book called More Happy Than Not, it's kind of set in a almost near future kind of scenario where there is this place called the Lateo Institute that deals with suppressing memories of individuals who've gone through traumatic experiences in order to kind of let them live better lives. Essentially, it doesn't get rid of the memories completely, but it basically makes it so that the person doesn't quite remember these memories, and it helps them to kind of move on in their lives, and it's fairly successful. There are some things that have kind of gone wrong with it, but the main thing is that, you know, it's worked for most of the people that have gotten this kind of surgery, and, you know, there's a lot of things that kind of are involved with going through the surgery and things like that. It's kind of played in the background to the main story of this book, which deals with this boy named Aaron, who is about 17 years old, and he has dealt with a lot leading up to this point in his life. He unfortunately lost his father to suicide, so there's a huge suicide trigger warning for this, as well as self-harm, as Aaron does try to take his own life and has a cut on his wrist, indicating that he has committed some kind of self-harm in the past. And there's a lot that's kind of going on for Aaron that makes it hard for him to really feel like he wants to stick around. The things, though, that do help him stick around are his girlfriend Genevieve, who he loves dearly, and his friends that he's grown up with his entire life. And things kind of go topsy-turvy for him when he meets this boy Thomas. And up to this point, Aaron has believed that he has been straight, that he has always been straight and never will change. And then when Thomas comes around, he starts to develop feelings for him and starts to really question his sexuality and question kind of who he is as a person. With that, though, comes a lot of complications with especially the friend group that Aaron has, as many of them are what I would consider to be gay bashers because they just don't seem to have any concern for human life that is other than straight. Throughout most of this story, there's a lot of events that kind of take place throughout the course of it that makes Aaron start to think that he should be getting this memory suppression done through the Lateo Institute, as he thinks that it's going to be a way to solve his problems, as he starts to really question his state of mind and his sexuality a lot in this book, and he thinks that a lot of his sexuality has to deal with meeting Thomas in the first place, and he thinks that suppressing his memory is going to change everything. The thing about this novel is that Adam has done such a really great job with expressing, you know, the fact that being gay is not a choice. Being bisexual is not a choice. Being pan is not a choice. It is not something that you wake up one day and just decide, I'm going to be gay, I'm going to be bisexual, I'm going to be whatever end of the spectrum you want to be on. It is not something that just you flick off one day and flick off the next. Being on the LGBTQ spectrum is something that, you know, it's something that you start to understand about yourself over time. The questioning aspect of the story was really spot on, and obviously this is an own voices novel, as Adam himself is gay and has gone through pretty much not this exact scenario that Aaron has gone through, but has gone through some troubles with questioning his own sexuality at about this age, and, you know, the problems that have kind of come from, you know, this questioning stage that has happened. Now, I can't speak for everyone that has obviously gone through this entire process themselves, but I had to say that for me, being on the LGBTQ spectrum myself, I found that this questioning stage and this kind of constant back and forth that Aaron was dealing with and the questions that he kept coming around with were things that I had thought about myself. I will be having a video towards the end of the month about talking about coming to terms with my own sexuality and figuring out what it is that I, ascribe to myself. And I just have to say that this was the best representation for the questioning aspect of, figuring out that you're on the spectrum. And it was so refreshing to see because I had not seen that before, because most novels that include LGBTQ characters, they're very set with what it is that they are usually, or they, make that decision and there's not much of a questioning stage, whereas this book is entirely questioning, and I really appreciated that because I feel like it made so much more of an impact. And then adding in the Lateo Institute, where Aaron could possibly even change himself to continue to be straight as opposed to accepting the fact that he may be gay, was such a layer of complexity that I think added so much to the story, because it brings in the argument that a lot of people who don't understand those of the LGBTQ spectrum bring up, which is you can change that. You don't have to be gay. You can just be with, another heterosexual person and be fine. And that's something that I think is so greatly challenged in this book. And I loved the way that Adam discussed it within this novel, is that, there is no changing, someone who decides that, they think of themselves as gay, or they believe that what they are is gay or bisexual or whatever. It's not something they can just turn off or on at will. It is something that is inherent in their bodies. It's something that they can't change about themselves, and to change that about themselves would be, I think, more catastrophic than anything else. And I think that that is really well played within this novel and really helps to understand kind of the mindset that a lot of people within the LGBTQ spectrum have to deal with. This book really also delves into an important aspect about coming out in general, and that is the fact that if you're in a community that is very unsafe, that has a lot of people who are against homosexuality or those of the LGBTQ spectrum, and you come out in those areas, that can easily be a death sentence for you in some very unsafe territories. You hear about these kinds of stories a lot in the news, and how there are just some random people who go up to gay, lesbian, bisexual couples, whatever, and they attack them in broad daylight. And I think that this book really brings that to light, because there's so much violence that is done to those of the LGBTQ community that I don't think is ever really expressed in novels. And I think that this also just brings such great light to the fact that coming out in unsafe communities, especially those where the person knows that they could be attacked for their sexuality, is important to recognize, because sometimes the community that you are going to be in is not going to be supportive of it, no matter how close your friends are to you. They may still end up hurting you because of your sexuality, and that's a really sad point, but it's something that is very, very real in today's society. The thing, though, about this novel, and I think something that would make other readers really hesitant to get through this book, is that because of all the things that Aaron has to go through in this novel, it makes it hard to swallow. And many times, I will admit, I had to put the book down because I just needed to process everything that kind of was going on. Basically, for me, it was one of those scenarios where I wanted to keep reading it to see if there was a light at the end of the tunnel for Aaron, as he dealt with so much and was going through some very, very hard things that it almost was like you wanted to see the good ending come out of it. And what's interesting about the way that this story is broken up is that it's not exactly linear. There's actually a point in time in the book where you have to revert back to some time previous to the beginning of the story, because there's information about the past that is important to understanding the present of the story. And while that could have been very confusing for a lot of readers, I really enjoyed that aspect, because it made a lot of things make sense in terms of, why Aaron is the way he is, and helping to understand kind of the situation that he's in more, and understanding just how hard things are for him. Because in the beginning of the story, you start to see, just how hard he has it, and you really feel bad for him. But in this point where we kind of revert back to seeing some things in the past that kind of have led up to this point currently, it makes you see just how bad things actually are. Like, you thought that things were at a level 8 at this point, but going through part of this novel, you see that things are actually more at like a level 15, and that's like really hard to swallow, but also really, really amazing to see, because you understand now really where Aaron is at in his life and how bad things have gotten for him. The best part about this is that it is a YA contemporary that is so impactful in less than 300 pages. This book by itself, not including the additional content that's added at the very end of the book, the story itself is 293 pages, which is not atypical for contemporaries, I would say, but is, I believe, atypical for something of this kind of magnitude and of this impact. And I thought it was great. I didn't think that there really needed to be any extension. I feel like the book wrapped up really nicely. This was to be a 350-page book. I think that things would have been stretched out way too much. So this is actually one book that I'm really happy with the length of it, despite it being so short, because I think that the length worked for this kind of a story. And I think that if it was to have been any longer, it just would have dragged out the story way too much and made it a lot harder to get through in the first place. So with that being said, as you guys may be able to tell just by how much I've really gushed about this story, I gave this book a 5 out of 5 stars. I was actually really debating whether or not it was going to be a 5 or a 4 stars, because I just, for some reason, was having a hard time giving it 5 stars when I had gotten through the first third of it. But once I got to about the halfway point and started understanding a lot of Aaron's past before the main part of the story, like the present part of the story, like when we learned about the past, I immediately changed my mind. I was like, no, this is great. Like, I truly love this book with every fiber of my being. And like I said, being on the spectrum myself and having constantly questioned, you know, where I am on the spectrum, if I'm on it at all, I really appreciated the fact that this focused so much on the questioning aspect and not just focusing on the solid, you know, determination of being gay or lesbian or bi or whatever, and just focusing on the thought process that goes on in somebody's head when they're trying to figure out whether or not they, you know, are gay or lesbian or straight. And it's just, it was such a really heart-wrenching read, but made me feel very validated in the fact that I had such a hard time with my own sexuality and coming to terms with it. And I feel like this has been really the catalyst for me wanting to talk about it in the future, which that video, like I said, will be coming out later in the month once I kind of have some time to really sit down and talk about things in the way that I need to discuss it, because there's a lot that goes on with my own sexuality that, you know, there's a lot that led up to me, you know, determining what it is for me and what I believe, you know, makes me happy and things of that nature. So anyway, thank you guys so much for joining me in this review of More Happy Than Not. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you have not read an Adam Silvera book, this is a good one to start off with. Maybe, I don't know, I still have more Adam Silvera books to read, so I don't really know if this is the first one you can start off with. But I think this one is just perfect for those of you who may be questioning things yourself, or are looking to find something that helps to explain, you know, maybe you're confused on, you know, how somebody could, you know, go through the questioning stages of, you know, determining your sexuality. This is a great book for that. I think that it's definitely hit the nail on the head for the questioning aspect of those in the LGBTQ spectrum. So thank you so much for joining me. If you guys did enjoy it, please do give it a big thumbs up. And if you're not already and you'd like to be, hit that button down below and subscribe to become an owlet in our flock. And I will see all of you guys in my next video. Bye, guys.